did a show. One thing I really learned from her is during rehearsals, we would always rehearse before we'd even go out of town for like a one-nighter.
Yeah.
But she would always say, honey, write it down. We're rehearsing, and she's doing something different from what her conductor wanted her to do. And she would say, this is what I'm going to do. Write it down. And I would write it down dutifully so I wouldn't forget it. But then, depending upon the situation on stage, she was like a true jazz artist. She would change it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Depending
Yeah.
upon the kind of feedback and the flow that we were getting, and how the act was going and the people were. She could change. Oh man, like in a New York minute.
Oh yeah.
And
Well,
we're in a different direction.
Yeah, she was so sensitive to the room and to the musicians. I mean, she'd pick up on everybody, and she just instantly just shift, even if it was just a little bit, just to hit that sweet spot, so that it just made it so much better. I don't know if that makes any sense whatsoever, but she just,
Oh, it did. Yes, yep.
Her ability to listen and adjust. She was not one of those performers that this is the way I'm going to do it, so suck it up. She was just never like that.
Well, that's the way she would start. That's the way we'd rehearse. So it was a package deal, and it was solid. And then that's pretty much the way she would rehearse with the orchestra when we would get to where we're doing for the one night. But then if she did something different, it was up to the rhythm section to take that flow with her.
Yeah.
And so my years with Basie were very good, because I never took my ears or my eyes off the Basie. And I did the same thing with Mel Torme, and I did the same thing with Lena Horne.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether to watch her conductor or watch her. So I got cross-eyed some nights, kind of looking in different directions. I always wound up with her because I knew that's the direction we were going to go anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Conductor would have caught up with it eventually.
Or later.
But that's funny that you mentioned Mel, because I know both of them were sticklers for rehearsals, and for good reason, especially with her when she would be working with bigger bands and have specific charts that seemed inflexible. But I feel like Mel kind of was somebody that, and you would know better than most, was somebody that once he trusted you, he would allow himself to kind of be a little bit more flexible, but otherwise he was pretty settled in. Does that make sense at all?
Yes. Yeah, it did. His show, in terms of the running format and a lot of the asides, a few of the little fun gags and stuff that we do, a little bit of shtick here and there, was really pretty set. Yeah. But sometimes he'd change a little something. He might do something in some of the scat choruses that we hadn't done before. Or he might do something a little bit different in what we might be doing, like a little trio number.
Right.
Where he'd sit down and play some piano and a piano, bass, and drums, and he'd be singing. He might pull that out of a hat. Yeah. We were never too sure when he'd do something like that. If he had the audience and he had the time and everything was just right, Mel would take off in a different direction because it would. Yeah. And it was brilliant. But it didn't happen too often because exactly of what you were just talking about earlier.
Yeah.
People would be talking, people would be saying, waiter, check please, anything like that. And Mel didn't have the overall opportunity of being able to fluctuate the act as much as he would like to. Yeah. But what he did do within the act was absolutely brilliant. The nights that everything just gelled was sensational. Well, the album that he and I did, excuse me, my name's nowhere on the album or my picture or anything else, was live at the Masonette that he did with the Al Porcino Big Band. And boy, it's blowing up a storm out there, but it's a beautiful day. So it's not like, wait a minute, who's out there? I just saw some shadows on the window, tree outside. Mel? But Mel, he did the one album that I'm on, and it's a compilation of a weekend of the same show that he did. One thing that he did do, though, is we do 2 shows a night, and they were not the same show. I kept a notebook every year I was with him, and I would jot down what we did first show and second show in the various places that we worked. So he never repeated the same show. If you saw him 8 months ago and you went back to see him, you're seeing a different show.
How neat. Good for him, though. That's
And
great.
and the second show was always different. It wasn't a completely different show, but it was different enough, maybe 40, 60%, sometimes different. There
Yeah.
might be a couple of tunes still in there that he'd done the show before, but he never repeated the same show all the time in the same places.
Yeah.
It
That
was
was
different.
smart. Yeah.
And it kept the band on their toes.
Hmm?
It kept him and me, especially,
Yeah.
my toes, because you always had to be aware of what was going on and how
Yeah.
it was going on.
Yeah.
But I've got recordings, the only two recordings that I have, the Live at the Masonette, and then good friend, at one time we played a week in Hobart, Tasmania, 2 weeks actually, in Hobart, Tasmania, and a friend of mine recorded one of the shows through the the speaker box where they were handling all the sound and everything,
Uh-huh.
and then did a CD and sent it to me. And it wasn't the same show that we'd done at the Masonette. That was a few years later. There
Yeah.
were a couple of tunes in there, but the big long tour de force was always different. He did a Gershwin medley. He did the tribute to Fred Astaire.
Oh,
He did
yeah.
a number of things. The big band medley thing that he put together.
Mm-hmm.
With Mel, it was incredible because he wrote most of his own arrangements.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he writes so much for the band, you'd wonder where he could get in and sing. It was almost like overkill.
Yeah.
Mel could. He was
Yeah.
one of the few people who could do that. He could
Mhm.
sing in that framework and make it work.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I remember one of my favorite movies was Easter Parade growing up, and that, of course, was a Fred Astaire movie. And of course, Mel did that tribute to Fred Astaire. But he was working for MGM at that time and had done some of the vocal arrangements on the Ann Miller tune "Shaking the Blues Away."
Oh,
And
yeah.
I didn't know that for years until I finally read the liner notes on a soundtrack album for Easter Parade, and Mel and the Meltones were in the background on "Shaking the Blues Away." Because when I was growing up, I wanted to be some weird combination of Ann Miller and Jeanette MacDonald and Esther Williams all and Carol Lombard all in one. And, and so Ann Miller was like I had to watch every step to try to imitate. And yeah, Mel did the vocal arrangements and the orchestra arrangements for that particular number. I don't know if it was for the whole soundtrack or not, but
that I don't know.
Yeah, you listen to it with different ears once you know who it is that you're listening to and go, oh, okay, got it.
By the way, a little bit of trivia for all you folks out there following this, and for you too, April. Do you know who one of the female members of the Meltones was? I'll give you a hint. Her first name was Jeannie.
No.
Well, she married a guy who played a little bit of music and wrote a couple of tunes by the name of Mancini.
Ah, okay.
Jeannie Mancini was married to Henry. She was in Mel Torme and the Meltones.
Really? I didn't know that.
She was a singer many years ago.
I was started, for some reason I had Carol Haney, but she was a dancer with Bob Fosse and had worked with Stanley Donen and Gene Kelly. So I was in dance mode instead of that.
But the thing is that I love so much is that Jeannie had a connection to Mel because of the Meltones.
Yeah, right.
And then later on, I have a connection to Jeannie through Mel and to Greg Field, who was a friend of mine that came after me on the bass band and married her daughter, one of her daughters, Monica.
Okay. Nice.
So I know Monica Mancini, who's a marvelous singer.
Yes.
Herself.
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
The mind boggles. Have you ever seen
know.
The Mind Boggle?
I know. And the first time I heard her, I think I had to play it 2 or 3 times in a straight row because it was just kind of one of those things where you're just listening with wide open ears and eyes, kind of going, wow, look what she did with that. It's kind of like when you're listening to Eddie Higgins, you're kind of like, wow.
I got a question for you. Have you ever listened to any of the really great artists sort of with a half an ear because you're doing something else and then they do something so incredible and you're saying, what was that?
Yeah. Yes.
It's just like knocks you in the head and you've got to go back and start and listen, sit down, forget what you're doing and listen to what they're doing.
Frequently. Yeah, I've done that. You know what? I did that on the first time that ever really happened to me. I was living in Santa Cruz with a roommate, and she had put on, because she wasn't a big jazz person at all, but she liked Louis Armstrong. And so she put on one of the things he had done with Oscar Peterson, and Tenderly came on a little bit later, and I'm washing dishes and we're talking. And there's a break right at the bridge in Tenderly that Lewis hits on trumpet, and it just, I think I dropped a dish and went, wait a minute, we need this, hold on. Yes, so that's, and it's great fun when it happens, because even if you've heard it before, it's something that didn't stand out to you before, because either your head wasn't in that right space, or you never really listened to it, or what. But I love that when it happens. Another album that happens is Billie Holiday's Lady in Satin for me. It's just one of those things where keep all sharp objects away from you, because you could slit your wrists.
Music. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I can't imagine a day without music. I
Me
can't
either.
imagine anything. Something someone told me one time was supposed to make me laugh, because they couldn't fathom this actually being true. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it is true, because I do the exact same thing.
Mhm.
Somebody told me a story one time. They went up to Miles Davis and he said, Miles, he said, do you ever listen to music? And Miles said, "Mm." He said, well, do you ever listen to any music in your head? Miles said, I'm listening right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I have
Yeah.
this constant. I have all the time, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I have no rest at all.
I'm glad you're the person that said that out loud, because I've always, that ever since I can remember, had that. And it's like, sometimes if I'm just done with whatever's going on around me, I'll just turn up the music in my head. And just, yeah, I don't want to listen to all of this. I'm just checking out. Thanks.
I got to tell you, another one of those moments. It just hit me. My wife Linda and I had gone out to hear a dear friend, Ernie Durawa, great drummer, here in the Albuquerque, excuse me, I'm sorry, Austin, Texas nightclub one time, and they had a small room, but they had a sound system to die for. And I'm sitting there with some other friends, and we're talking, and they're warming up the audience, and they put on Cream, White Room.
Oh, yeah.
In a white room,
Yeah.
with no curtains at the station. Well, I'd never really heard it, and I never really heard it turned up on a superior sound system. And they did that before Ernie and the group came out, and the bands, they're making all sorts of noise and everything, and then it comes to a dead stop, if you think of it, and the captain comes in a pow, and I nearly fell off my chair. I nearly went over backwards.
Yeah.
I've never heard that. I've heard it 100 times. I've never heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I know if you really, you can learn something new in recordings you've heard 100 times. I mean, I've told people that, and they look at me as though I've grown another head, but you totally can. It just kind of depends on what's going on. One album that I've been listening to that could heal tears in your heart is the Buck Clayton Legacy recording you did. That stuff will just,
was that all the cats joined in?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Because I am a huge fan of Buck Clayton anyway, as pretty much any other of our mutual friend will ever tell you. But oh yeah, that's stuff that just, it cures all evil.
Well, Buck was like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the recording that you did in tribute to him is what I'm specifically referring to. But yes, most of Buck's recordings, yes, absolutely, that too. But how did that particular tribute album come about for you?
That was Randy Sankey. Randy was the guiding force behind that, and I've known Randy for 100 years.
Yeah.
And he was putting all of that together, and I can't remember, Randy or somebody called me up and said, we're doing an album, you want to play? I said, sure. You know, it's for Buck, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're doing a tribute to Buck Clayton.
Right.
Love it. And he talked about some of the tunes we were doing. And the band, it all sounded like a great idea.
Yeah.
So if something as simple as that, hey, we're doing a recording, you want in? Sure. And that's it.
Had you played with Buck directly before as well? I thought you had.
A couple of times, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, not in a big band situation or anything. And I worked for Buck's band.
Oh, okay.
A couple of times I subbed for Mel Lewis when Mel couldn't make it. And Buck wasn't out in front of the band specifically leading and directing and playing, but what he did, we were in a nightclub down in the village. And what he did was he had a chair and he sat in front of the band and we would play. And then he would give us some, directions like a little softer, a little louder, something. Yeah. That was it. He was very, very bassy-ish, sparse in his directing. Yes. And the band was killing. The band was, and Buck's arrangements, his charts. Oh, it was a joy, a joy. very first album that I bought, I'm not making this up, the very first album that I ever bought was Basie, Breakfast Dance and Barbecue.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
live album that he did at like
Uh-huh.
4 o'clock in the morning and 3 o'clock.
Uh-huh.
They'd flown down from New York to Miami, played the special gig for the recording company, I guess it was, and then flew back to New York because I think they were playing Birdland at that time. But that was the first album. The very first big band that I ever saw that I remember was at the Virginia Beach Jazz Festival. I was in high school. My mother took me down there, and it was 3 nights of jazz. And on Saturday night, let me see, I think South Salvador was on Sunday night. I can't remember who was on Friday night, but Basie was on Saturday night. And I heard them live up front. I'd never heard or seen Sonny Payne. That was the one with the 2 Franks with Martian there, the 1960 or 61. And I was stuck. That was it.
Yeah.
The band got ready to go on. They were all dressed, I'll never forget this, in red dinner jackets.
Oh, wow.
Black, Shaw satin lapels and those cross dinner ties or bow ties that they used to have over their tuck shirt. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the most explosive force in jazz, Count Basie and his orchestra. And you know what he opened with? Little Darling.
Oh, of course.
And the audience melted.
I'm
and
sure.
There on, he could do no wrong. He could have played Mary Had a Little Lamb in 5/4.
Oh, yeah.
The audience would have loved it.
But you're not lying. That could have happened. And it still would have worked.
I'll never, ever forget that moment.
Oh, it's just that on that particular album, The Deacon is one that it's like, you can't not just settle in listening to that. You know, you just, it's like physically impossible not to just, I don't know, but I'm weird. The Deacon is the one I remember the most on that particular album, just kind of just hanging. It was Al Gray on trombone, or was featured on trombone, I think, on that one, and just kind of just sends you off into a different place, and you have to listen to it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, you had, huh? I'm sorry.
I was thinking so many great soloists throughout the years with that band. It was, so many fabulous people that I worked with later on, not on the band itself, but in various jazz situations and jazz parties and things. And the same thing with Duke's band. I never had a chance to work with Duke.
Oh.
I would have loved to have done that too. But I worked with all kinds of people that did work with Duke later on. So history.
Well, like Bill Berry. I mean, he would tell stories. I think he played at the White House with Duke. And so I was sitting in the back at Monterey Jazz Festival, because that's usually where I would see Bill and Betty and Gerald and his wife. And I remember Bill telling stories about playing the White House with Duke and everything else, and just some of and Bill would go off on some of the most swinging times that he had, because everything just clicked at unexpected times. Have you ever found that it's just like, you think this is going to be a trash night, let's just get through it, and then it's suddenly like everything just kind of goes okay.
Yep.
Just unexpectedly all comes together.
I've got something like that exactly. It can be so overpowering, it's almost scary, and I know you know what I mean. But I can't remember, it was my first or second time at Nice, at the Grand Festival de Jazz in France, that wonderful Nice Jazz Festival that they have. And with Basie, still with Basie, the whole conglomerate. It might have been the first time. I was just overwhelmed. Dizzy was hanging out backstage, digging the band. I mean, all kinds of things. And one night, Basie brought in some of the older guys to play a tune or two. And he brought in Billy Mitchell, who was playing on tenor sax from the X-Bass. Arnett Cobb came on, who I was fortunate enough later on to do a tour with. Arnett. It was beautiful. But he brought Arnett on, and Arnett came up and he got on the front. And I'm thinking, I don't even know who he is. That's how I'm still learning. I don't know who this man is. And he's on crutches. I can't believe he can stand there and he can play the sax while he's propped himself up on crutches. And we started playing one tune. I don't remember what it was, But we got about halfway into it, and we're out in this huge open area, surrounded by trees and grass and everything. And it was so overpowering. It was so forceful. I was hit smack in the face with what was going on. I just turned away to nobody next to me, and I said a curse word because it so like it hit me at that moment. It hit me. This is it. It all came together just for that second. And it was like nothing I'd ever really felt before. And I thought I had. But that night, and Arnett up there, oh my goodness. And it was something I didn't have, high hopes for. We're going to back some of these guys up, and they're going to play this, and it's going to be wonderful. And I'll smile. But Arnett got up there, and the truth of God came right through me.
You have heard the truth.
Oh, man. I don't even remember the tune.